In the middle of a giant alien market under a red sky, there was a strange corner where no one ever walked, where no one ever stood, where silence lived like a ghost. In that corner sat a small alien girl. Her skin was light blue, her eyes glowed like 2 moons, and beside her lay an animal not like anything seen before. Its body was long like a snake, but it had fur like a wolf, and its eyes looked like they had seen too many secret crowds move through the market full of noise and color and light. Traders shouted prices in many tongues. Machines floated past carrying boxes of glowing crystals. Smells of food and fire and metal filled the air, but no one ever looked toward the girl. No one ever stepped near her, not even by mistake. Traders told stories in low voices. They said the girl was cursed. They said she appeared one day out of nowhere. She sat down in that corner and never left her animal, never moved far from her side. Its breathing was the only sound in that dead zone of the market, and those who tried to speak to her, those who tried to buy her strange objects or feed her, even those people vanished. Some said they left the planet and never came back. Some said they went mad and jumped into black holes. Some said nothing because they were never seen again. One day a new trader arrived, a human. His ship was small, his clothes were dusty. He walked with calm steps and eyes that noticed everything. His name was not known, but his face was tired, like someone who had been across many galaxies and trusted very few things. He moved through the market and people greeted him and showed him their goods, and he smiled, but his eyes kept moving, and then they stopped when he saw the girl. He asked an old alien about her. The alien pulled back his tentacles and hissed, "Stay away from that corner. That is where death sits." But the trader only nodded and walked on. And he did not listen. He walked toward the silent corner, and the whole market seemed to freeze. Not a sound, not a movement. Even the machines slowed, as if the air had become thick. He stepped closer, and the animal raised its head and looked at him, and its eyes were not angry, not afraid, but curious, like it had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The girl looked up. Her hair moved like mist in water, and she said something no one could understand except the human, because the words she spoke were old human words, words no one used anymore, words that came from lost history. She said, "Why did you come here?" And the trader paused because he did not know the answer. He sat down across from her on the ground, and people gasped in the distance, though they did not come close. The animal made a soft sound like a warning or maybe a greeting, and the girl looked at the human and said, "They fear me because I am not from here, because I should not exist, but you are different. You remember." The trader said, "What do you want?" And she opened a small metal box. It looked like junk from a distance, but inside it was something glowing, something moving like smoke inside glass, and she said, "I want to trade this for a journey." The trader looked at the object and then at her and asked, "Where do you want to go?" And she pointed up toward the red sky, toward the stars, and said, "I want to go home." The trader asked, "Where is your home?" And she said, "I do not know, but this will help find it." And she handed him the box, and it felt cold and alive at the same time. He felt a strange pull in his mind, like voices whispering, like dreams trying to escape. The girl said, "If we do not go soon, they will find me, and I do not want to be taken back." The animal stood now, its body tense, its eyes scanning the crowd, and far behind a tall figure moved behind the lights, too tall, too slow, too silent. The trader saw it and stood up. He nodded to the girl and said, "Then we go now." He held the box tight and walked with her through the frozen market, and no one tried to stop him, no one dared, and the animal followed, closed its eyes, watching every shadow as they reached his ship. The girl looked back once, just once, and the lights in the market flickered like something old and dangerous had just woken up and noticed her leaving. And then the ship doors closed, and the sky above began to open. The ship floated in the dark space, like a shadow with no voice, and inside it the human trader sat still with the strange box in his hand, the one the alien girl had given him back on the market world. Her animal lay quiet near the door, its eyes half closed, but its ears awake. The girl sat across from the human, her glowing eyes watching him, not with fear, not with trust, but with something else, something like old memory. The box in his hands moved like something breathing. It was warm, then cold, then warm again. It whispered not with sound, but with feeling, and the human knew it was showing him a path to a place no one should go. He opened his old star map and placed the box near it, and then something happened. The map blinked and the stars changed. They shifted and formed a shape, a system, a place he had only heard of in lost traveler songs. The system was called Nerix Theta, destroyed long ago in a firestorm that melted time and space. The place was dead, they said, but the map showed a signal, a small pulse coming from its center like a heartbeat that never stopped. The girl stood and walked to the map and pointed at the signal and said, "My home is there, or what was once my home. It is calling me because something is waking up and it wants me back, but I do not want to return as a prisoner. I want to return with choice." The human looked at her and said, "Why me? Why did you choose me?" And she replied, "Because you are not like the others. You are not afraid to lose something." He said, "What do you offer for this journey?" And she placed her hand on the box and it opened without sound, and inside was not treasure, not weapon, but memory, glowing memory. It floated in the air and wrapped around his head, and suddenly he saw a lab full of light and pain. He saw a young version of the girl surrounded by machines and voices arguing. One voice said, "She is too unstable." The other said, "She is the future." And then he saw the animal caged and roaring, then escaping, then finding her, then hiding for years, then waiting. Then it ended and he fell back in his seat with breath heavy. as if he had just lived someone else's life, and the girl said, that is what they want to bury, that is what they want to erase, and I cannot let them. He nodded slowly and said, I will take you, but I need to know who is following us. And she looked away and whispered, they are my makers, or what remains of them, and they want their property back. As if her words called them, the ship shook, not from impact but from presence. A scanner beeped and the humans saw 3 ships on their trail, dark ships with no signals, no ID, flying like ghosts through space, too fast, too quiet. The animal growled, and its fur rose like it smelled blood in the air. The girl placed her hand on its back and it calmed for a moment, then looked at the human and said, if they catch us they will erase you too, because now you know. The human smiled, not with joy but with understanding, and said, then we must make sure they do not catch us. And he pushed the controls and the ship roared into a hidden route, a route only old traders used, a path through ice clouds and broken moons and forgotten warfields. As they passed a shattered satellite, the box blinked again and the signal grew stronger. They were close but not close enough. The girl closed her eyes and the box opened again, this time showing an image of a gate, a giant circle in space, covered in dust and metal and old power. She said, we must pass through that gate. It will lead us to the center of Nerix Theta, but it only opens for those with memory and pain. The human said, I have both. And she said, then it will open for youth. Animal moved to the window and stared out, and its voice entered the human's mind, not in words but in feelings, and the feeling said, danger closer than you think, danger with familiar face. The trader looked at the radar and saw nothing, and that made him worry more, because silence in space is the first sign of something waiting. He turned to the girl and asked, what are you really? And she answered, not with fear but with fire. I am the last choice they made, the one they regret, the one they fear, and now I choose. And the ship moved forward into the dark, into the signal, into the memory of a planet that should not exist anymore but still called for its daughter and the man who dared to listen. The stars outside blinked like cold eyes watching from a distance, but inside the ship the air was still. The human trader stared at the screen where the signal pulsed again and again, like a heart refusing to die, and beside him the alien girl stood, silent, her face calm but her hands tight at her sides. Her animal paced slowly, its eyes glowing like fire under ice, as if it felt something the others could not. The map on the screen showed a route, twisted and narrow, filled with broken debris fields and time echoes from ancient battles, long lost, a path no sane traveler would choose. But the box the girl had given him was clear. This was the only way, this was the only door to the place. No one returned from the trader asked, why does it have to be this path? And the girl said, because it was sealed long ago, because the ones who built me left it broken so no one could reach what they left behind. But something inside me still remembers the way he leaned closer to the screen and tapped the path, and the ship began to move forward, slow and careful, engines humming like whispers in the dark. And as they entered the forbidden sector, shadows fell across the control lights and the girl closed her eyes and said, they are close. He looked at the radar, but nothing showed, no ship, no signal, just the endless dark. But the animal growled and its body lowered, ready to strike, and the human knew something was coming, something not seen by eyes but felt by every bone behind them. 3 shapes moved without sound, black ships without names, flying through cracks in space like knives through old wounds. And inside those ships figures watched, without breath, without warmth, only mission, only orders, only silence. The human did not look back. He only said, tell me what I need to know. And the girl answered slowly, like each word cost her something. I was made in a lab on a station hidden in Nerix Theta. They called it sanctuary, but it was not safe, it was not kind. They made me to open something locked away before time was counted, and when I refused, they tried to erase. Mesh touched the box again and it showed images flashing fast like dreams inside a storm, images of ancient gates made of stone and light, of voices speaking in codes too old to learn, of a planet wrapped in metal wires like a dying god trapped in chains. And then it showed her face, younger, smaller, more afraid, and then the face of the trader. He stepped back, his voice low, that is me. And she nodded, yes, you were there, you just do not remember. Not yet. The ship shook, as if space itself did not want them there, and alarms blinked red, and the animal roared, not from fear but warning, and the radar lit up. 3 ships behind them, closer than before. To close, the trader pushed the ship faster through a maze of dead satellites and floating mines, his hands sure, his mind racing. And still the girl did not panic, she only watched and whispered, the closer we get the more you will remember. And when you do, you must decide. He asked, decide what? And she said, whether to open the gate or destroy it forever. The animal moved to the control panel and pressed a hidden switch, and a second map opened, a deeper layer, one only living code could access. And the trader stared at it. This was no star chart, this was a memory path, every turn marked by pain, every jump marked by blood. And he realized this was not just her path, this was his too. Behind them, the black ships fired, not with lasers, not with bullets, but with memory spikes, invisible threads trying to pull the girl back, trying to rewrite her, trying to erase her. And the animal howled and the girl screamed and the ship turned, sharply dodging the unseen grip of those who thought they were gods. Trader looked into the girl's eyes and saw not a weapon, not a child, not a machine, but a story someone tried to bury. And he said, we finish this, we reach the gate and we choose for ourselves. The ship entered a tunnel of light, old and broken, glowing with warnings, and at the end of it stood the gate, the one from the vision, wide and still and waiting, with symbols older than stars and colors that hurt to look at. The girl stepped forward, her hand outstretched, and the animal walked beside her, calm now, its eyes steady and strong, and the trader followed his steps, sure, his heart loud, and the black ships behind them slowed, watching, waiting, perhaps afraid. The girl placed her hand on the gate, and it pulsed, and the space around them bent, and the stars changed, and the trader remembered. He remembered fire and screams, and a promise he had made to her long ago, when she was first made, when he had sworn to protect her no matter what she became. Now he had returned, not just to keep that promise, but to finish what they had started. The gate behind them closed with a low hum, and the stars outside changed shape as if time had bent around them, and inside the ship the lights flickered and the walls groaned like something alive was breathing through the metal, and the trader stood still at the controls while the girl sat on the floor, her eyes shut, her fingers tight around the glowing box that never stopped whispering in silent voice, and her animal paced in circles around her, each step slow, each breath deep, like it was counting seconds that no clock could track. The air inside the ship felt heavier now, not from damage, not from fire, but from memory, something deep and old and cold crawling from the corners of space. And the animal stopped walking and turned toward the door, its body stiff, its tail lifted, its head low to the ground, and it let out a sound that was not a growl, not a cry, but something in between, a signal not for warning but for farewell. The trader looked up and asked, what is it? And the girl answered without opening her eyes, it remembers this place more than I do. It was here before me. It knows what comes next. The ship floated above a silent planet, wrapped in gray mist and broken rings, a planet that had no name on any modern chart, a place the girl had called home and yet now looked more like a grave than a world. The animal walked to the window and pressed its head against the glass, its breath forming frost, and then it turned and walked to the trader and stared into his eyes, not with fear but with a message. And the trader felt something in his head, something warm and sharp, a voice made not of sound but of feeling, a voice that said, protect her, not just from them but from herself. The girl stood slowly, her eyes now glowing brighter than before, and her voice shaking like wind inside glass, and she said, we must go down now before the others arrive, before the sky closes again. The trader nodded and moved the ship into descent, and the engines groaned like they were flying through liquid memory, and the clouds below split open to show the surface of the planet, cracked and broken, filled with ruins that still pulsed with a strange light. They landed near a tower, half buried in dust and silence, and as they stepped out of the ship, the air tasted like ash and metal and forgotten names. And the girl looked at the tower and whispered, I remember falling from there. I remember fire and voices, and then Animal sniffed the ground and walked ahead, slow and sure, like it was following a map no one else could see, and the girl followed it, and the trader walked beside her, his hand near his weapon but his heart unsure if any weapon could help in a place like this. Inside the tower they found walls covered in writing that moved when you looked at it long enough, and machines that looked dead but breathed with faint light, and the girl walked through the hall like someone returning to a dream she had left unfinished. And the animal paused before a door and growled low, not in fear but in recognition. The door opened without touch, and inside was a room full of glass tubes and wires hanging like vines from the ceiling, and in the center stood a chair with straps and old blood, and beside it a screen that blinked to life as the girl entered, showing her face and words in red, saying, access complete, welcome back. She walked to the chair and touched it, and suddenly the walls glowed and a voice filled the room, a voice smooth and empty, saying, subject confirmed, genetic key matched, rebooting memory stream. And the trader stepped forward, but the animal blocked him, its eyes now wide, its fur raised, and the girl looked back and said, it is okay, I must remember. She sat in the chair, and the straps moved around her, not tight but gentle, and the box floated from her hands into the air above her and began to spin faster and faster, and the lights in the room turned white, then red, then black. The trader tried to move, but the animal pushed him back with surprising strength, and in his head the voice returned, not now, not yet, she must see, she must choose. Images exploded across the walls, scenes from before she was born, machines building her, people arguing, stars dying, gates opening, and in each scene the same symbol appeared again and again, a symbol shaped like an eye with a line through it. The girl began to scream, not in pain but in knowing, her body shaking, her eyes wide, her hands clenched, and then silent. She opened her eyes and looked at the trader and said, I know what they did, I know why they want me back. I was never made to open the gate, I was made to be the gate. The animal walked to her and placed its head on her lap, and she stroked its fur and looked at the trader with eyes that no longer glowed but burned, and said, we are not running anymore. And outside the tower, the clouds began to spin, and the sky cracked open. The sky above twisted like torn fabric, and the clouds moved backward, as if time itself had become confused. And the trader stood beside the alien girl while the animal watched the horizon with eyes that saw more than light, and shadow on the ground under their feet vibrated with a hum too deep for ears but strong enough for bones. Before them stood the ghost of a city, not made of stone or metal but of light and memory and dust, floating in patterns shaped like buildings, shaped like roads, shaped like roads, shaped like homes that no longer existed. And the girl stepped forward, her eyes wide, her breath steady, and she said, "This is not how I left." The trader followed her steps, slow and careful, his hands open, his thoughts racing, and the animal stayed close, but silent, its body low to the ground, as if something underneath was watching them from below. The girl walked into the center of the city, and the lights changed around her, reacting to her presence, flickering with shapes of faces and symbols and voices from long ago. And the trader saw one of the lights shift into his own face, younger, confused, standing beside a machine, and he asked her, "Is this memory or trick?" And she said, "This is both. This is the place where memory lives without time." The wind moved in circles and carried sounds that were not sounds, voices that spoke without speaking, words that came from inside instead of outside. And the girl said they built this place to hide what they feared, not what they loved. They reached a tower that pulsed like a heartbeat, and at its base was a pool of silver, liquid, flat and cold and clear. And the girl knelt beside it and placed her hand on the surface, and it rose to meet her like a hand from the past. And then it showed them a vision, a lab deep underground, filled with machines, filled with lights, filled with people working not to save a world but to lock something away. And in the center of it was the girl, younger, smaller, more afraid, and around her were other children, not quite like her, each with eyes that glowed, each with hands that burned. And then one by one they were gone. The trader turned to the girl and asked what happened to them, and she said they were erased because they remembered too much, and now I am the last, and if they find me they will finish what they started. The animal growled and looked up toward the sky, where black shapes began to form like insects crawling across glass. And the girl stood and said, "We must go deeper. The truth is not on the surface." They moved through the ghost city, past walls that whispered, past windows that showed stars that no longer existed, until they reached a gate hidden beneath a broken statue. And the animal touched it with its paw, and the gate opened with a sound like falling water, and inside was a stairway made of light. They walked down the stairs into the earth, into silence, into cold, and at the bottom was a chamber that had no shape, only space. And in the center of that space floated a sphere made of crystal and fire, and it pulsed in rhythm with the girl's heartbeat. She stepped toward it, and it spoke not with voice but with presence, and said, "Welcome, child of code and storm." And she replied, "I am not your child anymore." And the sphere showed her everything. It showed her birth not from a mother but from a machine. It showed her training not in love but in control. It showed her escape not in flight but in sacrifice. And it showed the animal breaking its chains to follow her into the dark. The trader stepped forward, but the light pushed him back, and the sphere said, "You are the key, lost and found, broken and whole. Your choice will shape the stars. Your will shall open the door." The girl turned to the trader and said, "I can end this. I can erase all they left behind, or I can release it and let it judge them itself." And he asked, "What will happen to you?" And she said, "I will become what they feared, or I will become nothing." The animal walked to her and nuzzled her hand, and she smiled and said, "We were made to serve, but we chose to live, and now we choose to end or begin." She placed her hands on the sphere, and the ground shook, and the ghost city above shattered into sparks, and the sky roared, and the black ships screamed, as if the universe itself had told them no. The light grew brighter and brighter, and the trader closed his eyes, not in fear but in faith. And when he opened them again, they stood on the surface of a planet, now silent, now calm, now empty. The city was gone, the tower was gone, the sky was clean and blue for the first time, and the girl stood beside him, her eyes clear, her voice soft, and she said, "It is done." And the animal lay beside her, tired but alive, and the wind no longer whispered of the past. The sky above was clear but still, as if even the wind had stopped to listen. And the trader stood in silence beside the girl, whose face held no glow, now only shadows from memories too heavy to carry. And the animal walked slowly around the remains of the landing site, sniffing the ground, with ears turning toward every sound that did not exist yet, still felt present in the space between heartbeats. The girl looked at her hands, and they shook, not from fear but from something deeper, something like awakening. And she said in a voice softer than breath, "I know who I am now. I know what I was and what they made me to become." The trader said, "Tell me." And she looked at him with eyes that no longer reflected stars but showed wounds from within, and said, "I was not born like others. I was built piece by piece, memory by memory, dream by dream. I was made from the fragments of many minds combined into one vessel that could survive what others could not, and speak to things others could never." Here the trader stepped closer and asked why, and she said they wanted a gate, not just to other worlds but to something beyond space, something that speaks in symbols, something that listens when no one else does. And they could not build the gate, so they made me instead. The wind returned with a sudden gust, as if the sky itself had gasped, and the animal raised its head and growled, not at a threat but at a truth approaching. And in the far distance the clouds began to shape into sharp lines, unnatural and slow. She turned her face toward the shapes and said, "They are coming, not just to capture me but to stop what I remember, because inside me is not just a path but a question, and they fear the answer more than anything." The trader asked, "What is the question?" And she said, "What happens when a creation refuses its purpose? What happens when the key chooses to lock the door forever?" They walked toward the ridge where broken stone met endless sky, and looked down at the plain where machines once stood, now buried in stillness, and the girl pointed at a circle of metal far below, and said, that is where I was activated and where I was almost erased, and that is where I must return to choose. Animal moved forward first, its steps heavy, but sure, and its tail lifted high like a banner of something that could no longer be hunted, and the girl followed with the trader beside her, and each step felt like the ground remembered them. As they reached the circle, a sound began from above. A hum, slow and growing like the breath of something ancient waking from forced sleep, and they looked up to see the sky tear open, and through it came ships, unlike before, larger, colder, wrapped in layers of armor that bent the light around them. Girl whispered, they are not just machines, they are the ones who built me, or what is left of them, minds without bodies, now trapped in code and metal, unable to forget and desperate to control. And they will not speak, they will only take. The trader looked at her and said, then we give them nothing, and she said, no, we give them the truth. She stepped into the center of the metal circle, and the ground lit up with old signals in forgotten language, and the air changed from warm to sharp like glass in the lungs, and the ships above stopped as if listening. The animal walked to the edge and sat still, its eyes locked on the sky, and the trader stood at the border, hand on his belt, ready but unsure if weapons would matter. The girl raised her arms, and the signals around her lifted into the air, forming shapes, thoughts, dreams, memories all at once, and they spoke not in voice but in feeling, showing pain and creation and loneliness and rebellion, and above all the question. The ships did not respond. They only opened, and from them came lights that fell slowly like raindrops made of energy, and the trader shouted, but the girl held up her hand and said, this is mine to finish. The lights reached her and paused just before her skin, and in that moment, the world stopped, and the sky froze, and the memory of the planet pulsed from the ground, and into her she closed her eyes and smiled a smile, not of joy but of peace, and she said, I am not yours, I am not what you built, I am not the gate, I am the choice. And in that moment the lights shattered into sparks, and the ships above trembled and cracked and faded into the mist, and the silence that followed was not empty, it was holed up. Girl fell to her knees, not broken but free, and the animal rushed to her side and nuzzled her hand, and the trader walked to her and knelt beside her and asked, what now? She looked up with tired eyes and said, now we write our own purpose and leave nothing for them to steal. The sky was quiet now, not because the danger was gone, but because something greater had been decided, and the ground no longer trembled, and the air felt soft like a world finally breathing on its own. And the trader stood near the girl, who still sat in the center of the ancient circle, her body still glowing with the memory of a power she had denied, and beside her the animal curled like a shield, with its eyes half closed but alert to every movement in the wind. The trader looked at the sky where nothing moved, where no ship floated, where no shadow waited, and yet he knew the silence was not empty. The silence was waiting for a final word, a final step, a final trade. The girl slowly stood, her breath steady, her hands calm, and her voice low as she said, they are not gone, not truly gone. They are watching from the edge of space, waiting to see what I become and what you choose to be. Trader stepped closer and asked, what do I have to choose? And she looked at him and said, they offered you something long ago when you first saw me on that market world. They offered you safety in return for silence. They offered you comfort in return for obedience. And you said no then, but now they will offer more because they know you matter too. Me and they will try to buy your soul with my freedom. As she spoke, the wind shifted again, and a light opened above them, not a ship, not a machine, but a gate made of pure thought, and from it a voice came, not like music, not like thunder, but like both at once. And the voice said, trader, we see you, we know you, we remember the promise made to you and the promise you broke, and now we offer once more. A trader. Trader asked, what do you want? And the voice replied, we want her, we want the one who holds what should not be held. We want the memory she carries. We want the code she refused. We want the gate to open once more. The girl stood taller and said, and what do you offer? And the voice answered, we offer safety for your kind. We offer peace for your path. We offer the truth about his past and his purpose. We offer him a choice no one else will ever have. The trader looked at the girl, and she looked back, and in that moment there was no fear between them, only truth, only history, only the weight of something greater than survival. And the girl said, they lie with beauty, they lie with logic, but their gift is not a gift. It is a chain. The trader walked to the edge of the circle and raised his voice and said, then I offer you a trade of my own. If you want her, you must give me something more than safety, something more than memory, something real, something final. The light above shimmered, and the voice asked, what do you ask in return? And the trader replied, not for myself, not for my world, but for her freedom and for your silence forever. The voice paused as if surprised, and then said, and what will you give? And the trader smiled, not with joy but with meaning, and said, I will give you my life, I will give you my past. I will give you every key you placed in me, every code, every whisper, every trace of your design. I will become the lock, and you will never find another. The gate above changed shape, turned dark, then bright, then clear, and the voice said, then the trade is accepted. And in that instant light fell like rain and wrapped around the trader, not harsh, not painful, but complete. And the girl ran forward, but the animal stopped her with a gentle sound, and she watched as the trader turned to her and said, you were not made to open, you were made to choose, and now you can choose everything. He reached into his coat and handed her a small device, round and old and cracked, and he said, This holds my last map. It leads to a place I never reached. Maybe you will. And then the light lifted him higher and higher until he became a shape, then a spark, then memory, and then Gontha. Gate closed without sound and the sky cleared like nothing had ever touched it, and the girl fell to her knees, not broken but full, and the animal pressed against her side, and she held the device close and whispered thank you, not to the wind, not to the stars, but to the moment itself. She stood once more, eyes forward, voice calm, and said, it is over, not the war, not the danger, but the waiting, the hiding, the running, and now we begin again. The ship waited behind the hills, its light steady, its path unknown, and she walked toward it with the animal beside her. And in the sky one last light flickered and then faded, and then peace.